Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. On this episode, we're going global, all the way to Melbourne, Australia, for an exclusive interview with Michael Schneider, Managing Director of Bunnings, one of the leading big box home improvement retailers in the world. If you don't know Bunnings, they are a $13 billion retailer with 377 trading locations employing over 44,000 team members. We talk about the 1-2 punch of the Australian wildfires and COVID-19 crisis and how the business continues to operate, innovate, and serve their communities across New Zealand and Australia. Next up, Amar Singh Principal Analyst at Kantar Consulting, takes us through the trends, performance, and competitive set of the hardware DIY retail sector and brings us up to speed on the trends that were happening pre-COVID, the performance of the category so far in the COVID era, and top 3 tips to stay competitive and win market share. But first, let's check in with Michael, live from Melbourne. Mike, welcome to The Voice of Retail. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, Michael, and it's strange to be here on the other side of the world to you. Thinking back to last year when some of our team from Bunnings were over in Canada, and really grateful for the time that you took there to sort of give us a really good insight into the Canadian retail environment. And who'd think that here in the middle of a global pandemic we'd be doing a chat, from one side of the globe to the other.
Well, we're living in uncertain and surprising times, and that's for sure. For my listeners who may be less aware, I had a great opportunity to meet you and your team, as you said, in Toronto. But for those who may be less aware of Bunnings, give us a sense of your personal professional journey and then your role at Bunnings and a bit about the retailer that Bunnings is.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been in retail most of my working career. I left school thinking I wanted to be a high school teacher, which is what I went off to study. But alongside that, like a lot of us do, I had a sort of a part-time casual job working in a discount department store in Sydney, and fell in love with the industry, fell in love with customer service, fell in love with working with teammates, fell in love with the whole sort of mechanic of buying really great product and presenting it in a way that inspired customers to shop. And for most of my retail career, have sort of built that up. I stepped away from retail for a few years in the late 1990s and worked for one of Australia's major 4 banks, which was a really good insight into customer experience from a different point of view and the world of finance. But it also reminded me that my heart lay in retail. So back into retail with the New Zealand retail firm, and then joined Bunnings in 2005 and worked as a regional manager looking after a group of stores in one of our Australian states, and then about 12 years ago started looking after all of the Bunnings stores in Australia and added the New Zealand business to that portfolio in 2014, and then in 2016 became managing director of Bunnings. And for those that know the brand, it's now an Australian and New Zealand retail icon, I guess, in the sense that it's a very well-known and understood brand. We've been fortunate over the last decade and a half to have won Reader's Digest Most Trusted Retail Brand Award, 15 straight, which is an amazing achievement in itself. But I think it's a business that's focused very much around everything for a customer's home, from the front fence to the back fence of the property, and as much in between as we can possibly sell. We've got 380 locations across Australia and New Zealand, and I'm really privileged to be part of a team that numbers over 46,000 Australians and New Zealanders working in our stores, DCs, our trade distribution centres, and our support centres. So it's a great business to be a part of, and we focus very much on playing local and really making sure that we are deeply a part of all the communities in which we work, which I think through the challenges we've been facing over the last 2 or 3 months, has really hit home the importance of being local and being relevant. And we've been very humbled by the community's response to our business through this time. And I think, all of us around the world are spending more time at home than we ever have before, working from home, not really being able to go out and do very much. And I think that's probably rekindled a relationship with our homes and the products that Bunnings sells, whether it's an essential product for an emergency repair or something to keep you occupied, has become something that's been very important, and we've been pleased to play our role in that.
Well, it's one of those many things on my list around the home that I've been wanting to get to. I know personal experience, I've started ticking off things on a list of improvements in the house or just fixes that have been sitting there for quite a long time. So your statement really resonates with me. Set the stage for us about Australia and your situation. You really had a 1-2 disaster punch, if I can put it that way. You know, we watched the wildfires and got COVID to deal with. And how's your country coping? I imagine a retailer yourself, as you said, you've got a pivotal role in many, many communities with, rebuilding and offering support. I was just reading your finance minister talking about a sobering future economy. It's, certainly not unique that there's a major economic impact, but set the stage for us of how things are in Australia.
Yeah, I think your description that it's been a bit of a 1-2 punch is a really accurate one. We started the year, with incredibly challenging circumstances in many communities around Australia. I did see, the way that the world reported the fires. We call them bushfires in Australia, but we're familiar with the term wildfires from what we see in Canada and North America. But it sort of portrayed that the whole country was ablaze. It probably wasn't quite as dramatic, but it did. Certainly did take a huge toll. People lost their lives. Millions of native animals were killed, and millions of hectares of land were destroyed. And I think the country really sort of swung into sort of a recovery mode from that. And at the same time, we started hearing about this flu type virus that originated outside of our borders and was spreading around the world. And I think the advantage for countries like Australia and New Zealand is we are islands, and closure of our borders is a relatively easy thing to do by comparison to European countries and countries in North or South America. I think there's more challenges, or even Africa for that matter. So the decision to do that and go into lockdown in the various forms that presented across the Australian states and New Zealand, I think has sort of seen a very quick flattening of the curve. And there's a term that this time last year no one had heard of before.
Like supply chain. Most consumers didn't know what the supply chain is for their entire life. Now it comes up in virtual cocktail conversation.
Yes, it is sort of du jour, isn't it? And I think that, we sort of did what we do best, which is, as I touched on before, really play locally. And I think through the COVID period so far, we took a very disciplined approach. We sort of enacted our crisis management plans. And I think, for a lot of us in business, we've talked for the last few years about the importance of data and analytics and the need going forward to sort of be less reliant on gut feel and instinct and much more on what the data gives you. In a situation as we've gone through, there's no playbook, and we did have to go back, a lot to our own instinct and experiences and really pull together as a team. But we sort of centred on 4 very clear things, and the first of those, unsurprisingly, is the safety and welfare of our team. We've invested millions of dollars in protecting our team, keeping our customers safe, communicating almost in a counterintuitive way to our customers to sort of try and spend as little time as possible in a Bunnings store. We saw right around the globe home improvement retailers being seen as essential, but many either unwilling or unable to create the right safe environment for customers and team and needing to close their doors. For our Australian business, we implemented what government has seen as and recognised as industry-leading standards for safety and hygiene, and some very innovative developments in our online platform, which have really meant that we've had a high degree of assurance that to the best extent possible, our customers are safe when they come into shop, and our team are safe in their day-to-day frontline work with their teams. Like all businesses in Australia, our support officers. We move those to work from home, but our store teams need to be in store and they need to be there with customers, and our leadership teams have been very proactive in being out there with them so that they know that they've got that support. The second piece for us was making sure we had the stock, and I think global supply chains are going to be something that I think are going to be disrupted significantly going forward. Europe probably won't, and North America maybe won't have much of a summer in terms of being able to get out and do things, and we'll certainly have a different winter in the Southern Hemisphere to what we otherwise would have had, and the sort of products you're buying and planning for, given the long lead times on a lot of things, will be disrupted, and I think that'll be more telling and challenging in other industry groups such as apparel, maybe less so food, but apparel probably most hard hidden. Home improvement will probably be somewhere in the middle, I'd anticipate. But having access to stock is important. And the third part, is for us very much the work we've done with government in helping them understand the importance of business and the role it plays in the economy. Bunnings, probably supports close to a million jobs directly through the 40-odd thousand team that we employ. We have a domestic supply chain across Australia and New Zealand, and by that I mean products that are manufactured in market. So products like paint are manufactured locally in Australia and New Zealand. We grow trees for our timber products locally. We grow plants for our nurseries locally. And all of those jobs, along with supplier representatives and vendors and trainers and sales managers and the like, that probably numbers 40 or 50,000 across the Australian and New Zealand market as well. And then we have a trade account program where we support trade customers and small businesses, and that number is well over 700,000. And when you group that together and you talk to government and you say, by recognising the essential nature of the products and services we provide, we can support this part of our economy and this part of our employment base. I think it really resonates with governments that, if they can help us to find ways to continue to trade and continue to move product through, there's good outcomes for business. And the other piece for us that's been really important, and I think is emerging more around the world as a real issue, is what are the mental health challenges of communities that can't do the things that they normally do. And we've certainly seen in Australia and New Zealand a noticeable spike in issues around domestic violence and issues around mental health, and unfortunately, predictions that more people will die potentially of suicide than they will from COVID-19. As a result of the anxiety and stress that being cooped up in your own home for long periods of time has. And
have you seen that reflected in your operating environments? I've talked to retailers here in Canada who are reporting higher incidences of violence in the store. They're reporting, families on outings it's their only chance to get out, and that causes its own challenges. Yeah. Is it reflected in your operating environments?
Yeah, it has happened. I think governments here have enacted very strict laws around any sort of violence towards frontline workers. So that's healthcare workers, retail workers. So, for example, in Melbourne, where I live, if you are violent towards a frontline employee of any sort of business, you're liable for between a $5,000 and $10,000 fine and criminal prosecution. So government has stepped in very clearly and enacted a range of powers for police to be able to protect. But it is there, and I think it's also just there because people are scared. And I think we do that in our own team. We have 40-odd thousand of our team on our enterprise social media platform. We run Workplace, which is a Facebook product. And, we put content up, we live stream, we update our team very quickly, but it's also been a good lens for us to look at how our team are feeling through this. So, we've worked really hard to make, emotional and psychological support for our team, very easy to access. And it's been great that our team use that because we want our team to feel safe mentally and physically. And
well, it's such a change of paradigm, right? I imagine not many of those 40,000 employees thought they would be, frontline components in a pandemic war. It's just such a change in paradigm. So you're right that how much of your time do you spend on that? It seems to be a big component, as well as the CSR. I look at your site and I see a lot of, asks and you participating in a lot of things that are just part of the community. I was seeing this Fight MND beanie, you called it. We'd call it a toque, and all kinds of different things, I'd imagine.
I think, on the we've developed a heap of content, and we're working with a number of mental health organisations to just put content up on our website and on a couple of the TV networks around basic projects to stay active at home, because it's probably, doing things in your garden, doing things in your garage, doing things in your kitchen, whether it's cooking or craft or painting or something. They're more positive health outcomes mentally and physically than, potentially consuming a lot of alcohol and sitting in your lounge room watching television. So, we've worked hard on that. Yeah, the CSR piece is important. The idea of being local means we work hard to support local communities. What Bunnings is very well known for in Australia and in New Zealand is our community barbecue. So we run what Australians call a sausage sizzle. So community groups can come to a Bunnings store on a weekend or a weekday if they want. We provide barbecues and marquees and gas and equipment, and they cook sausages and put them in bread, and they sell them for $2.50 Australian. And across Australia each year, that raises something in the order of $35 to $40 million for local soccer clubs, local athletics clubs, local community groups, scouts, Girl Guides. You name it, we support it. We can't do those at the moment because of hygiene restrictions and physical distancing. So we've had to find other ways. So things like the beanie to support, the research into motor neuron disease, donations to children's hospitals, donations to sporting clubs, donations to mental health organisations. We've had to find different ways to support the community to how we do, but it is an important part of that. We talk about community as we live here too, because in every community our stores are, our team live there, they raise their families there, they send their kids to the local schools, all those sorts of things. So I think, Bunnings is synonymous in Australia and New Zealand with being a very rich part of a local community. And one of the things I love most about our brand is that most of our customers associate Bunnings with their local store. They don't associate it with a 400-odd store chain that employs lots of people. They just have that local connection, and I think that's a really lovely thing.
When you're thinking about the changes you've made in operation to operate during the COVID era, you talked about how important it was to support your frontline employees. What are the other kind of one or two top lessons that you've learned that you could share with retailers about operating in this environment that have really made, are really vital? What are those one or two, maybe even three things that lessons, let's call them lessons learned? You said, if you get these one or two, maybe three things right, you're most of the way there in trying to operate a business safely and with confidence in the COVID era.
Yeah, I think the first one, is the importance of convenience. I know when I was with you in Canada, I sort of gave you a bit of a sense about our online shopping journey. Bunnings, one of the last major retailers in Australia, if not the last, to go online with sales, and that was really a mindset change for the business. For a long time, the business had a view that, particularly for home improvement, bricks and mortar was really the only way that you needed to go to market. My leadership team and I have a very different view, and we've worked hard to accelerate that. But I think that in itself has given businesses an opportunity to probably connect and engage with customers in a different way. We've developed a really strong contactless model, which is called Drive and Collect. So for consumers that are at risk or don't want to come into the physical environment, they can buy product from our website. They can schedule a pickup time, and that product is put straight in their car. They don't rely on needing to go into the store environment for click and collect. They don't rely on a delivery driver touching their products, and they don't know where the delivery driver's been.
Has that been popular for you? I mean, I've done that here locally. Yeah. Some of the what we call non-essentials for a time being, and it's just now not the case that some of the major hardware stores in the province were declared non-essential, and all they could offer was curbside. And I actually found it. I picked up 22 bags of topsoil, and I found it actually even more convenient. I just swung my car around. The associate came out, put it in the car. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, it's certainly been very popular and was one of the models. So I think, many people know just how tight the New Zealand lockdown laws were. They were much stricter than Australia. It was one of the first models approved by the New Zealand government when they went from stage 4 to stage 3, and a number of other retailers followed our lead in that market. So it has been really popular. And I think, what's been fascinating, is watching how many businesses have redeveloped their model. We've got 5-star restaurants in Australia that now send home, you can buy a pack of their produce and their condiments, and you can make the recipes in your own home. Businesses are being forced. This has forced business to adapt in a different way. And I think agility is the sort of second thought that comes to mind is, for a big organisation, we've had to be very agile. I think skinning down our agenda to those 4 things that I touched on earlier in our chat, has helped us sort of eliminate the white noise, if you like, around the business. And, that's been, really helpful for us to move very, very quickly. So agility, convenience, and I think, the other piece which has been important, which is the very first of those four things, has been safety. And I think we've worked very hard to scour the globe for best practice, implement a collection of that, which is very much the way that we've sort of evolved the Bunnings store model over time. Is sort of study global peers, whether it's Canadian Tire or Lowe's or Depot or Sodimac in South America or Hornbach in Germany or Kingfisher in the UK, and bring the best of the world to Australia. We've sort of taken the same approach, and then we worked very hard with government agencies to sort of walk them through it so that they had an assurance that we were doing what we said we were doing, because there's always danger that businesses can spin a good story but maybe maybe not deliver on that promise. And the promise we wanted was for our team and customers to keep them safe. So I think those would be the three things, Michael, that are very important. Choice and convenience, agility as a business to adapt your model, and keeping people safe. And I think that's created a good level of insurance and insulation around the business model, and allowed us to sort of continue to sort of drive availability of product for our customers.
Well, the future is notoriously difficult to predict, clearly, as we started our conversation. As you think through the next number of years, whether they're temporary changes or permanent changes, whatever the COVID era looks like or lasts like, what kind of implications are you thinking in the medium to long term? Supply chain, how you source your products. You already source many of them locally. Capital investments. Do you see more front-facing touchless technologies, marketing programs? In Canada, you mentioned Canadian Tire. They've stopped sending their flyers out. That was 10 million pieces of paper, 10 million flyers a week that they've now switched to digital. That could be one of those tipping points in terms of the printed versus digital. When you reflect on the changes that will be permanent or made permanent or needed to be adjusted, what comes to mind in how you operate, how you go to market?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It's one that certainly occupied our thinking, quite considerably. I think we're using this as an opportunity to really look at the business and challenge ourselves. I think the ability to have delivered so many innovative changes in our digital platform and physical changes in our stores, has really shown us that or reminded us that what's really important is great value and the right products for your customer. And we'll double down on that, and we'll use this as an opportunity to sort of really interrogate our whole strategic agenda and make sure that, we use it as a basis for a degree of transformation. The future is just this massive unknown. If I think about our sector, have Australians and New Zealanders fallen in love even more with their homes and skills that they've developed in the DIY space? And will we entertain more at home? Will we focus more on bringing people into our homes as a safe place? I'm not sure if it's a global term, but a term that's often used in Australia is your home is your castle.
Yeah, sure.
Do people sort of really sort of double down on growing more in their back gardens and decorating and living a simpler life more happily at home, because there's less option and choice outside the home, and those options and choices potentially are more expensive in the medium term, particularly if you think about airline travel and entertainment. If there's less seats on a plane or less seats in a theatre, I'm guessing those seats will be more expensive, and they'll force different choices. So, that's one scenario. Whereas the other scenario that, our customers have spent, a few months effectively confined to home quarters, and all they'll want to do going forward for the next 12 or 18 months is do anything on their home. So we have to sort of pick our way through that, but we'll work hard to make sure that, whatever way we do it, we do it listening to our customers. We've evolved our marketing messages as with Canadian Tire, we think about different ways and obviously different messaging and different platforms. So we'll do more of those things. But what I do think is going to be a challenge for all economies is going to be getting people working. And I think, a lot of talk goes into employment or unemployment, but the thing that we watch quite closely is underemployment. So, as businesses come back to life and shops reopen, if the volumes aren't there, we know that people that work in our sector, particularly those that are on less certain contracts, potentially you might need 30 hours of work a week to pay your bills. If you can only get 20, then you're essentially underemployed. And what does that do to the economy? And I think they're the sort of challenges that will be ones for government and business to work through, as will housing markets. Do people value their homes more? Are they going to build more homes so that they can live? Does it shift the way we think about renting? Does it,
where people live? Do they stay out of crowded cities? Because that certainly was the trend, where bigger cities were getting bigger, and we see perhaps some of the downside of that in cities like New York, where people are now like, maybe it's a little too crowded for me here in a COVID.
There's no doubt. I think the other piece is going to be on supply chains. I think there'll be a more critical look at a diversification of the supply chain. I think, we've seen if certain countries have got, a bigger issue with controlling a disease, and they've got a strong part to play in the supply chain, then we need to look at that and look at diversification. And the other one, I think, is probably, the outsourcing of jobs. I think about a lot of companies in Australia that have had call centres and contact centres in parts of Asia and parts of the subcontinent. And, during a hard lockdown, we've got no control over what's going on in those locations. So, does it mean that a lot of jobs that once upon a time could be outsourced suddenly are being done in a domestic market where there's a greater sense of understanding and control? And it's the same it's the same for capital allocation. We announced in our New Zealand market yesterday our proposal to close seven of our stores. We've got about 50 stores in New Zealand, 53, and closing 7 is a big impact. But the disruption of being fully closed for 5 weeks, really forced us to look critically at the financial returns in that market. And businesses, it's important for business to be connected and engaged with government. And I think in the Australian construct, we've had a very productive and collaborative environment where business has been, really consulted well on the challenges and risks and been asked to support. And that's not always the case in other markets. And I think businesses allocating capital will always seek to allocate to the highest level of certainty they can. And in uncertain times, that will make that capital allocation decision an even more cautious one.
What's next for Bunnings? So we talked about some consolidation. Clearly there's reconfiguration, adoption of e-commerce is going up, not down. And then where can folks learn more about Bunnings? They want to keep tabs. It's such a great retailer and world-class and really a lot of lessons to learn.
No, thank you. Our website's bunnings.com.au or www.bunnings.com.au, and you'll find history of the company and a lot of things there. We've got a really clear strategic agenda going forward. We want to continue to enable the whole organisation on the digital journey. So, to sort of steal a basketball term, it's a full court press. We're thinking about it from a supplier engagement point of view, from a customer engagement point of view, and a team engagement point of view. So it's not simply about selling more hammers online. It's about how we can drive efficiency in the business, deepen engagement with our team, and truly, continue to have a world-class business, but one that is very relevant. We see on the trade side of our business an enormous opportunity for growth. Last month, we completed the acquisition of a small specialist industrial tools business, and we see opportunities to learn from that family-owned business and then investigate ways to sort of scale that. And we have similar thoughts in a number of trade categories where, through the nature of a DIY large format retailer, you tend not to get the participation from the specialist trade. So we see opportunities for growth very much in that category. And then it's about how do we enhance and expand our range. In November last year, we launched MarketLink, which is our marketplace, our online marketplace. So I talked earlier about the way we sort of the lens through which we view range is sort of the front fence of a property to the back fence of a property, and MarketLink lets us deal to adjacencies that we don't think we've got a natural competency or right to play in. So that might be fitness equipment, which has been a real hit while people have been at home, but it includes bedding and it includes softer furnishings, which we don't see as core range for Bunnings, but we do know that a customer who's decorating their home or updating their home will be interested in those products, and we can connect trusted sellers, through that network with our customers and through the Bunnings website. And you can buy products from Bunnings and products from our market link partners in the one transaction. So it's a really convenient piece, and convenience is a theme that I've talked about. And then it's about, considering how the built environment gets used differently. What do future stores look like from a design point of view? How many do we need? And what is the assortment and mix in those? And I think we've got really good plans in place for that. So I think, if you're not growing and you're not challenging your model all the time, then I think your business is at risk. And I think the sort of retail history timeline, if you like, over the last 100 years is probably littered with businesses that got to a point that said, we've done all we need to do. We've sort of arrived at our optimal position, and we'll make no more changes. And most of them are
Let's just harvest what we've done. Yeah. You've talked about fencing. I guess we should give a shout out to our friends at Peak who brought us together.
Yeah.
So one of your suppliers is here in Canada.
John,
a great supplier.
Great suppliers of ours, and been great long-term partners. And I think what I see in businesses like Peak Industries is a company that is focused on growth and focused on innovation. And I think that's why businesses like theirs and many of our other suppliers do such a great job with Bunnings, is that there's this willingness to sort of collaborate and grow. And it was very opportune, and I think a lot, and I reference this both my retailing and financial services days. I think there's a lot of similarities between Canada and Australia, and the Canadian community and the Australian community. I think that values and beliefs are quite similar, and I think challenges of big geographies is another one for retailers. And I know I talked to the Home Depot Canada team. That was very much on their mind, is how you solve those problems. And I think, sometimes doing the sort of trips like that we did last year, make the world, bring the world closer. We've continued some good collaboration with the team from Depot, and Jeff and his team do an amazing job there. And we were so impressed with things there. And I know that they've taken a few learnings, from our business as well. So I think that's one of the ways that retail will continue to evolve is where it makes sense to share ideas and practices, and even things like the conversation we're having. Hopefully there's one or two things in there that the people that are listening into this podcast kind of take a note of, or it piques their interest. And I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. So if anyone's got a question, I'm always happy to answer it.
Well, Mike, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being on The Voice of Retail, a world-class retailer sharing your learnings. You're right. I think you're a model for a modern retailer, and we really wish you the best. And I look forward to the day where I can visit you and you can visit me, and hopefully that day will be sooner than we know it. But until then, please stay safe and continued success in evolving your business.
Yeah, and likewise, and to you, Michael, it's lovely to catch up. And it only seems like yesterday we were there, and it will be nice to find a use for my passport other than proving my identity. But getting out and about will be a great thing to do. But in the meantime, to all of your listeners, I hope everyone stays well and safe, and the same for people that they love and care about as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
This episode is brought to you by Tectonic Architecture, specialists in adaptation and resilient design. There's a lot to consider in reopening your doors and ensuring a safe environment for your team and your customers. With a strong background in store development, temporary construction, and post-disaster response, the architects at Tectonic are ideally positioned to support you, your team, and your projects during this challenging time. Tectonic fosters close working relationships with their clients by listening to and focusing on their needs. Their senior leaders have worked internally on store development teams for multinational brands and on high-profile, time-sensitive projects. They understand firsthand the need for flexible, cost-effective, and practical design solutions for projects big and small. As BC enters Phase 2, Tectonic is supporting their clients with updating and negotiating pandemic-related contract terms during procurement and construction. For clients resuming operations, they are supporting on two fronts. First, adapting break rooms to protect employees and back rooms for changing inventory levels. And second, understanding how consumer needs have changed, adapting existing layouts and displays to mitigate risk, and generally reimagining what the in-store shopping experience is today and how it will need to shift in Phases 3 and 4. As architects, Tectonic is adept at interpreting building permit regulations, health and safety requirements, and translating those into spatial concepts that they can help you present to landlords, municipal authorities, and internal teams to instill confidence that you are taking the necessary steps to meet public health guidelines. To find out more about the work that Tectonic Architecture does and how they can support your efforts, visit www.tectonic-arc.com. That's www.tectonic-arc.com. Amar, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing, my friend? It's been a long time. The last time you and I saw each other was in New York at the big show in the hallways of the endless aisles, so to speak, of the big NRF show. How have you been?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me on the show. I've been well, trying to cope as much as I can. But yeah, it's definitely a very different world since then, since mid-January when we met in New York.
It's hard to imagine what that's going to look like in 2021. At least they've closed the Jacob Javits Center as a hospital, so I guess that's progress. But it's hard to imagine what that conference is going to look like. I'm sure the NRF is putting a lot of thought power into that. It's such an important element for them. Tell us about yourself. Let's kick it off. Tell us about yourself, your personal professional journey. I know you fairly well, but I'd love to learn more. And then your role at Kantar and about Kantar, the firm itself.
Absolutely. Well, I started my career with Kantar Insights and Legacy Millward Brown when I finished my master's in market research. And it was interesting because when I was on the brand and advertising research side of things, I tracked a lot of the CPG companies as well as the retailers that I consult with now back then with the company. Then I went to a boutique market research company that's up and coming. It's Hot Specs, as you probably know, with Mr. Skillen. So I was with his team for a couple of years. Then I moved to Kraft Heinz in a brand management role. And then I had this opportunity back at Kantar with the consulting division where I'm right now. So in my role, I lead the syndicated insights as well as client engagement projects for Canada, as well as home improvement now in North America, as well as retail technology. And I work very closely with our pal, Dave Marcotte, very closely, who's the global insights leader at Kantar. Thanks
for mentioning Dave. It's kind of a troika, you, me, and Dave, and Carl Boutet, our great friend Carl Boutet. I think the last time the four of us were together, Carl wasn't, I think he was in China during NRF this year, but I think it would have been store at Retail Council. So it's great to hear those names. I'm going to have Dave on my other podcast, The Food Professor. We just listened on the podcast to Michael from Bunnings in Australia, such an innovative, well-respected entrepreneur in the hardware section. And I thought it would be great to have a conversation with yourself just about the sector itself, the North American, Canadian retail hardware industry, even globally. So like, what are some of the trends? So let's talk about that. As we think about the pre-COVID era, which is only 8 weeks ago, 10 weeks ago, feels like forever. But as you were sitting in 2019, early 2020, thinking about the hardware category, the hardware industry, the retail sector, what were the big trends? It's a great place to start because we can start with what the trends are, and as Carl has said, the great acceleration of some trends into the future and others that are different. But from your perspective, what were the big trends in that sector of retail as we headed into 2020 and beyond?
Yeah, and before we go there, Michael, I just really want to make sure we differentiate home improvement and home hardware a little bit. So I'll start with the global perspective first. Globally, things are doing well. When you look at developing countries such as the countries in Asia and elsewhere, basically the home hardware or the home improvement sector is classified into three tiers. The first is contractors, the stores who are just fulfilling the contractor needs. And then you have the do-it-yourself consumer, which is, the stores are more like the IKEA stores. So they provide you all the expertise and help you with your do-it-yourself contracts. But then you have the one store that's just for subcontractors. So those were some of the trends we were seeing at the global level. They were sustaining, they were doing well. And as you know, in North America, the biggest home improvement players are the Lowe's and Home Depot, and Lowe's with the several banners here in Canada, with 5 of them to be precise. They were transforming the business to be more, omni-channel compatible. And the one is the Home Depot really stood out with their One Home Depot strategy, where they were providing digital integration with in-store experiences. You could locate your merchandising. You can map the whole store on the app and just find the exact location where you're going to find it in the store. I mean, those developments were really paying off now to them. And so that's when Lowe's also made the transition in consolidating their teams, consolidating their businesses in Canada, close some stores, Rona stores, or re-banner them. So there's a lot of consolidation going on at that end, and also developing the digital technology. And overall, the sector was doing well. The Home Depot did a little better than Lowe's because they really capitalized on that, the Black Friday sales last year, just before Christmas. But overall, the retail sector was healthy in North America, even in Mexico as well, with Sodimac and Home Depot, they're doing well. And this is one channel that has really sustained itself even amid the crises, and they've really come out along with supermarkets in the positive growth.
I think of a couple of things as I reflect on what you're saying. I mean, I think no channel or no sector of retail has benefited more from the demise, certainly in Canada, of Sears than has this format, because that entire big ticket business, not entire, that's a kind of vast overstatement, but I think back to, my days. I was Black & Decker for 3 years in marketing the consumer power tools. And I remember the Home Depots of the world and the big box, they rarely had kitchen appliances, like big major kitchen appliances. That was the purview almost exclusively. I mean, Sears had a huge share, but now that Sears is gone, you really, really see that go to the forefront, particularly in the big box stores. So I think they've been a beneficiary of that, just from a category expansion perspective. I wasn't sure it was going to work, but it seems to have worked well for them. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, that whole demand of appliances and, the window shutters and blinds, that business really got transferred over to Lowe's and Home Depot, but that's been going for the last couple of years. Right. But the real advantage that the Home Depot and Lowe's have had is they have really marketed themselves well to the North American consumers, specifically here in Canada. Their marketing campaign's been great. They're super active on Instagram and social media, and they're connected well with the shoppers. And the big beneficiary of that is the pro shopper. The programs, they're more precise, they're more personalized with the integration of technology. And as we know, the pro shoppers are 8 times more profitable to these companies in terms of volume orders as well as the margin. So there has been a great shift. And to your point, Michael, these retailers, both Lowe's and Home Depot, they have really made financing the big ticket items easier for shoppers as well through their financial programs and credit card programs. And that has also helped to grow some of their big ticket categories within their stores.
How important is the contractor business to the big box stores? I mean, I see, you might see them as different segments. We would see them as different segments, but holistically to these big box stores, how important is the contractor business versus the homeowner business generally? Do you need that contractor business to really do well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, your do-it-yourself consumers is great, but then you have these do-it-for-me and the pro contractors. Those are where they make the volume business. I mean, they're high margins. They buy a lot. They buy more frequently, and they are more profitable. And that's why you see how Lowe's and both Home Depot within the home hardware channel, they're extending their programs. Lowe's in the U.S., they now offer they're offering more loyalty points and loyalty incentives for the pro shopper. And Home Depot has had that advantage for many, many years. And Rona and Reno Depot, especially in Canada, they're exemplary for having relationships with the pro shoppers. So this is a very important aspect of their business, where they make 8 times, like I said, more. They're more profitable to these guys. So yeah, they're definitely focused on them. And now they're also becoming more tech savvy, and that's also helping these retailers to cater to their needs super quickly.
I think about the industry in Canada. It's been very dynamic over the past. It kind of comes in spurts, right? You had the Rose-Lona merger, and they've done a bit of consolidation. And I think of recently PV picking up Ace which is, I thought, a nice addition to their portfolio. I thought it fit well in with the TSC stores, and then home hardware has been under some focus with a new CEO who's been brought on as a change agent to that great franchise. So, what kind of growth in the category do you have an idea of the growth percentage? We think they're doing well. Is it a mix of just organic growth, and also, I guess it also depends on housing starts and all these other things, but I guess I'm talking pre-COVID. We'll get to that later.
Yeah.
What kind of growth in the category have we kind of seen as you would see it?
Pre-COVID, it was very strong. I mean, the housing sector has been stronger than ever, before the crisis. Consumers spending a lot. And, there's this whole, this new infatuation with the $25,000 kitchens where everyone has to model and make them super cool. And that trend was really going on. So, people were spending money. They were buying granite, which is coming from, Italy and all the other places. And so there was a lot of imports that were happening. And given the trade wars going on, so most of the retailers were also trying to diversify their sourcing. There were many companies who were, sourcing from local players, and a lot of people will be surprised to know that, if you look at your pots, they're not coming from China; they actually come from Italy and Germany. Right, in the clay pot. So there was a lot of diversification going on, and this sector was resilient. It was growing very quickly. And you talked about Ace and home hardware. I mean, those are the best examples of having a very strong interpersonal relationship with shoppers. Shopper would go to those stores for their home hardware needs over anyone else because they can have direct conversation and be greeted by their first name by the owner operators, right? So there's a whole aspect of that. And Michael, I grew up in Port Hope, Ontario. And so TSE stores and the small town stores, we were very close to our home hardware stores and the TSE and a bunch of other home hardware stores. I mean, and those markets, I mean, that used to be a Walmart back in the day. You can get a lot of things from there, from pet care and everything. So the relationship they had really paid dividends pre-COVID for even the smaller players in this market.
So let's fast forward, so to speak, to the COVID era, the past 8 to 12 weeks. It's been some crazy weeks. Michael talks about from Australia, what you and I would probably know, that we're with more people at home, they're starting to tick off more things to do in their lists, and they're doing all kinds of different things. So what have you heard? I mean, it's been from a crazy demand of shockwave-like of products to trying to operate. But what have you heard in the past couple of weeks operating in the COVID era for this sector?
Well, this sector has been super resilient. I mean, we saw declines in other sectors, but this sector has somehow stayed very resilient, and that's also reflected in the results that they produced. Yes, there were stores that were closed here locally, but consumers still buying a lot of spring merchandising. They wanted their lawns to keep them busy, fertilizers and lawn supplies and the garbage bags and whatnot. So this store was the source for all those needs, and home appliances for those freezers and new fridges, and people spending more time at home, and they kind of realized, wow, we need a lot of improvement in there. So this is our new nest. And then, there are a lot of things that need to be done. So they, upgraded some appliances. A lot of, shoppers, they upgraded the current appliances to more smart appliances. So we saw that surge. And overall, your home hardware needs, your bolts and nuts and your locked doors and all that stuff. So across all those categories, we saw some strong sales, and the data is reflecting that. And I think the one aspect that really stood this channel apart from the others is their preparedness for this. I mean, Lowe's and Home Depot, they were very quick to respond to the crises. They started curbside pickup quite quickly, and then the lag time wasn't too long. I mean, sometimes it was you had to spend more time getting your next slot at the local grocery store than at the home improvement store. Right. So
yeah, I had good experience. I did a couple of curbsides with a couple of retailers and in the category, and I had good experience, just as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't classify Canadian Tire as a home hardware store, because that store is like, it's a true Canadian store that carries everything. It's like one of those Western Canadian profiles. So you go to any of those stores with London Drugs, it doesn't only sell drugs, it sells pretty much everything else. as well.
Sure.
So, and that nature of the store, and even Canadian Tire was very quick to respond, and they opened their curbside pickup. They launched very quickly, and it's been streamless, more or less. I mean, there were some challenges at the beginning, but everyone's picked up. So I think that flexibility, what we're seeing is paid as dividends in post-COVID crisis, but consumers are still buying their lawn supplies. And the one other reason is most of the merchandising for the spring season was secured before the crisis hit in North America. And that put them in a very good space to weather the storm.
I want to ask you, you mentioned smart appliances. And, when I looked at buying some appliances, I looked at them and they're not inexpensive. And it felt, and I hadn't looked at them in a couple of years, it felt like they were just gadgets, like being smart for smart purposes, but they weren't really adding any value to my life. How is that, how the manufacturers have kind of moved that ball forward? Have they moved the goalposts forward, in your opinion? Are they actually building utility into these smart elements of these appliances?
I mean, the one thing is the manufacturers have really harnessed the ecosystem now, which I call them. So, you have the Alexa devices, then you have the Google Voice compatible devices, or some of the devices that are compatible with both of them, right? And when you add that to your ecosystem, then it doesn't become that novel gadget. It really is starting to serve a purpose. If you can see the inventory in your fridge from your phone, for some folks, it really works well. If you're a busy professional, and mostly if you're urban, then if you're on the go, and then if you can have a quick scan of your fridge and the things that you need, you can definitely automate that. And our research actually shows that the save and subscribe services in Canada, where you basically automate some of your frequent purchases online, is stronger than some of the other more developed e-commerce markets, including the U.S.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
The kind of the replenishment market. I guess that makes sense, right? You need, milk, eggs, butter. All right. Well, let's talk about operating in the COVID-19 era as stores of all formats start to open up. What's your advice to the senior executives in the hardware industry? It feels like from a homeowner perspective, there's good demand now, great demand. I'm imagining the paint suppliers, are doing well. Everybody's painting. I know my daughter's painting a room as we speak, kind of thing. And I'm sure paint is doing well. But of course, it's a competitive environment.
Absolutely. Now, there are three things when we consult with our clients who play in this space. The one thing we tell them is understand how to harness the e-commerce channel. Make sure how you can optimize your supply chain. And so make sure when you're gathering your stuff, your raw material, you're sourcing your raw materials, just make sure you have a good portfolio of backup options of local suppliers. Right. And so there's no stockouts. You don't see any of those supply chain disruptions. And the next thing you do is, once you understand the whole e-commerce model, then know how to optimize your product portfolio. You got to focus on the SKUs. They're more important. They're best sellers. So you can prepare and channel your resources to the SKUs. They're going to provide you with bigger margins and better sales. And then have those conversations. I think the one thing you're going to understand is, from a supplier's perspective, have the clear communication with the retailers about what you can do or what you cannot do. The last thing you want to do is overpromise, under-deliver. And for the executives who are the retailers in the space, I think many of these guys had a head start, like I mentioned, with the trade wars going on. They were starting to look for other options other than China and some of the other Asian players. I mean, mind you, right now, 30% of the building materials are sourced from North America and Europe, right? And then you have the home appliances. They come from some from China, but many from South Korea and Taiwan. Right. And then
Mexico as well, I guess, is in that mix as well, right?
That's right. Mexico will be tools. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So in those markets. And now and if the pandemic, if it goes for a long period of time and it just goes for another wave and we have another lockdown, then we have to look inside and see what are some other players, what we are contingency plan to make sure our supply chain is not disrupted and our stores are well shelved. And this is something we're seeing here in Canada with localization. We have some, the new startups, the local startups who are fulfilling orders on behalf of consumers, like Instacart services. So the third third-party services. They're more local, much more nimble, much more agile, and they're delivering on time. So that's one. They have to pay attention to look for those partnerships if their supply chain is at capacity or their e-commerce chain is at capacity. The next thing, like I said, is look for your local options. Make sure you have the contingency plans and maintain the quality. And then, empower your store managers to look for local options. And that's been such a great story for home hardware stores as well as Ace hardware stores, because they are empowered to look for local options. And it builds great credibility. The one thing within Kantar, we have another division or within the consulting division, this is called Futures. And what they look is the DNA profile of the Canadian shoppers, what are important to them. And Canadians, they really value local manufacturers and local ingredients in their products. So if you can somehow amplify that, the Canadians will really prioritize that in their decision-making process and will be more, receptive to those products. So it's all about building equity. And this is the right time, really. This is the time where you can provide leadership, you can provide resources and advice to people who are really looking for advice to how to, weather the storm like everyone else is. And right. the one retailer I point out would be who's doing a great job at this is Shoppers Drug Mart with their stress management tools. They partner with Maple with telemedicine services for shoppers, and they're providing many resources how to deal with stress and as well as cooking resources to just keep people busy and just help out. And those things they don't go unnoticed. Consumers like that, and that's an opportunity for us to build trust and brand equity in the long run. So I would say the same thing, and not that the retailers in this space are not doing. I mean, Home Depot and Lowe's, they're providing the digital tools and digital videos and workshops for help. But I think if they can keep passing that message and also amplify it a little more, they will reap rewards when we're out of the woods in the long run.
Well, great insights. I mean, it's a great conversation. How can listeners get in touch, learn more about yourself or Kantar, stay up to date with all the great content you and Dave are putting out to help retailers navigate what's next? Where can they go to keep up with all that great content?
Absolutely. So you can go to Kantar.com and you can search for the Insight division. We call it KRIQ.com. So Kantar Retail IQ. So KRIQ.com. Or if you just go to the Kantar.com page, we have a whole series running for COVID, and some of those webinars are free. So every week our leaders come and they deliver free webinars from across different channels and different sectors of the company just to help our clients as well as those who are looking for help in these times. So we have a series of them saved there so you can access those. And Dave and I, we write our content on a monthly and sometimes weekly basis these days. So we have a lot of COVID leadership articles covering all channels, both in the US and in Canada. So so if you need more information about that, you can look at our contact information on the website and you can reach out to us directly.
Well, Amar, thanks so much for joining me on The Voice of Retail. It's a great way to package together the interviews with a leader, global leader in the sector, and now with your analysis putting such great context to that interview. So once again, thanks so much for being on The Voice of Retail. I wish you continued success and be safe, and I look forward to talking with you soon, if not necessarily seeing you in person for a while. So again, be safe, and thanks for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me over.
Well, thanks to Michael and Amar for being my guests, and thanks to Tectonic Architecture for the support of this episode. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc., and you can learn more about me on www.emmyleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.